Welcome back. Next project on the car is going to be installing on the A-pillar post in the Mustang fuel pressure gauge so that I can monitor the fuel pressure as I'm driving on the track. I've had an occasional stumble or hesitation, and I want to make sure that the fuel pressure stays where it's supposed to be, and I can kind of rule out that symptom because there's no way of me to check that. I do have a live gauge under the hood, but it does me no good when I'm driving it and it happens. It's not predictable, so at least when it does happen, I'll be able to glance easily, find out what's going on, and then remedy that situation. The injectors, coils, plugs, all that stuff's been changed. Compression, leak down test on the engine's fine. So the next step is me monitoring the fuel pressure. So stay with me on this one. All right, this is the Autometer A-pillar single gauge pod. That's all I'm not going to do. I'm not going to add another. I don't plan on adding anymore, so I'm just going to use this one. And I did slide it in underneath the weather stripping, and this is about the position I want to have it. So this is the camera looking from my eyes, and the view is right here. It doesn't block anything off the side. I don't like things sitting up too high, so I like to be a little bit more discreet. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a happy medium, plus it gives me room to clean in here. I haven't decided if I'm going to trim this edge off here or not, but at least I can mark it with a pencil line here, and then I'll pull the A-pillar off and mount this. I'm not sure if I'm going to drill a hole in the A-pillar inside here and run the wires down there. I may just put a notch in the bottom of this gauge holder and run my wires down along the pillar here, because it's close enough to where I can come down and go right in through the dash, right down in this area right here. So we'll have to see how that turns out. All right, I've gone ahead and marked it with a pencil. I'm going to pull this off and get it out of the way here for a minute and pull the pillar off. I'll get this pillar off, and it's out of the way. So my pencil mark is right there, so that's where the top of it. Top of it's just gonna be on that. Then I'm just gonna go right down in through here into my dash rather than drill a hole in the A-pillar. So, and then I'll get behind there and do my wiring, and then get it out to the engine compartment. I have everything laid out here that I'm going to be using. So again, this is the gauge. I'll pull the plastic off once I get it in. Gauge will be plugged in. This is the power lead, which is going to go to the bottom of the gauge here, and I'll wire this underneath to fuse panel and power as per the instructions. And this is the lead for the sending the transducer. So this end, of course, is going to go into the gauge. I'm going to have plenty of wire. I do have terminal ends for this plug, so I think once I get this situated, I'm not going to have all this extra wrapped up in a loop under the dash. I'll cut it and then I'll resplice that, so we'll get to that. But this is going to be my adapter. So I'm going to thread this into my block here, and then this is going to go on the car, and I think I am going to put it in the back rather than put it on the side rail where the fuel line comes around and get this all bunched up. For right now, I'm just going to undo this, and this will go in place right here, and I'm going to have it aiming down so that the plug will come in the bottom. That'll go in at the regulator there, and then the hose will get connected here. Here I have this little plastic plate where the old throttle cable came out, and I'm just going to actually take this off, and I'm going to drill that to feed my harness through, and I'll put a grommet around that, and that'll get me into the dash area, so I don't have to go hunting or poking around for another one. So that's the plan there. Okay, now you can see the wires coming down that I shoved down through the A-pillar post, and I'll grab those with my little pinchers and pull them into this area right here. So again, this is where the wires, the harness went down, so I have plenty left here to go to where my gauge is going to go. There's the plug right there. So those will get tucked down in there, and I'll do my splicing under the dash. This is the wiring harness from the gauge, which is this piece here, which just goes down through the A-pillar post. It's just too short for where I want to put it. So I put a connector on here. This is just loose right now to hold everything in place. So there's 4 wires. This is for the light. This has already been stripped back, so I'm going to put some heat shrink around this. This will go on here and get soldered and wrapped. And then it goes around the back through a loom. And then these 3 wires, one is for ground, one is the key hot, ignition on, and the other one is 12-volt battery. And those are going to get connected into this harness here, and I'll shrink wrap all that. And then that harness will stay in here. So at least it was designed so you could unplug this, take this whole thing out, and this wouldn't be hardwired to the chassis. Yeah, I could. If it was a little bit longer, I could solder wires onto here and then have it, but then I could never pull this out. This would always stay with the car. So at least it could go with the gauge. So that's the process I'm doing here, and then I'll shove all this back. But once I get this tied in, I'm going to do a quick test by just holding the gauge and plugging this in and leading the sensor around the engine compartment to the gauge. We'll start the car and we'll see what it does. So I'm going to get busy and solder this stuff. This is all tied back in now, so light switch is back in. This wire right here, which is actually shrink wrapped for protection, spliced into the dark brown wire on the headlight switch, which is the park lamp, so that'll be running with the headlights on, and as well as the parking lights to power the gauge lights. And then the rest of it comes, so it comes out of here and goes around. The rest of them come around the back into this harness right here that's been shielded. And then each one of them were split into the corresponding 12 volt, ignition 12 volt, and ground wire in this harness that goes up to the dash because it was just easier, and then wrapped. And then so this harness is back. The dash is ready to go back in. I'll be ready to do a test. And then again, it's plugged in, and then it comes out right here. So this will be up in the pot. I have enough room, I have enough slack, as you can see right here. That's the existing one. So I have enough play, plus the fact that I can take this completely out of the car, take that out. This harness can stay in here for whatever reason, but it's there. So that's the worst part, doing all the soldering and working in here in tight quarters. It's pretty frustrating, but that part's done. So the next thing is to put the dash back in so I can start the car, plug the gauge in, and do a test. Just getting ready to do a quick test to make sure dash has just been set back in. I shift lights out, but we're just gonna check this thing. So I got power there, looks like, and it looks like I've got a little over 60 pounds. I'll go double check outside. So I'd say that's running like 62 PSI. So let's go check. And my gauge is showing about 62 PSI. So I'm going to say that the gauge works. I don't have any leaks here. So this is going to be basically upside down, so I don't have it sticking out this way. Looks good. This was my old throttle cable cover that I had. Didn't have a hole in it, so I drilled a hole, and I'm going to put a grommet in there in my hand. Put a grommet over the sending wire, the harness. That's going to go through there. So this will sit like this, grommet inside, then I'll bolt this back, and that's how I'm going to get it into the cockpit. Getting ready to tie everything back up. That's my tack light. Harness comes back here, plugs over here for the power, which again was all tied in to the dash, and that runs up through the pillar post. I decided to go ahead and drill a hole in the pillar post because it's a lot easier. So the gauge is in. I still have the dash bezel to put in, but for right now we're just doing a check. The pod's in, it's wired. So I'm going to go ahead and cycle the key. And it does a little sweep. And it's reading 62 PSI. I'll double check that out, which I've already done, but we'll just double check it again. And I'll probably reset this down to about 58. So I'm gonna leave that run. I'm about 62 PSI, just as what the gauge says inside, so I'm gonna lower this a little bit. So out here I have it just about 59, just below 60, so we'll see what it is inside, but I'm going to let it go at this. So we're right at 60 or below, but let's see. And it's reading just below 60, so I'm going to go ahead and fire it up. I'd say 59, 60 PSI. So I'm going to let that go. It's good. One of the features on this gauge is you can change the color of the dial by pressing this button. So there it goes. Okay, I'll let it do its thing. And so you kind of get an idea on what the colors are, and then you can pick whatever you like accordingly. This is the one I like. So again, at least I'll be able to watch the fuel pressure if I have any kind of an issue, starvation or a flat spot going on, and I can kind of rule one thing out over another and look to some other areas. So basically that pretty much is done, with the exception of, again, just putting my bezel back in, which I'm painting right now. But I'm going to be taking it out on a road and do a little road test and see what happens. So recapping, the sensor transducer is here in a AN fitting that I just put in line with my fuel line. It unplugs right here. The wiring goes down, comes up along this side, goes into my old throttle cable plate that I made. Put a grommet in there, and then it's fed into the dash. I had the final placement. This is about my eyesight right here. So key goes on, it does a little cycle. It's kind of inconspicuous out of the way. I don't really notice it even with the blue light when I'm driving around in the sun. And I've kind of calibrated made sure that the gauge is actually reading what the pressure under the hood is, which it's accurate, so I'm real happy about that. I did take it out for a test drive. Everything seemed to be normal, so I'm just going to wait and monitor it. So thumbs up on this one.